You're good.
All right. All right. So, going to start with storylines 2023, our fantasy baseball preview and prediction show. I thought there was a couple interesting storylines this year. I think I'm going to do less predictions on team and more a little bit kind of just like some things I saw that I thought was really interesting, things I'm looking forward to. So that's how we'll start it off. The first storyline that's going to be super interesting is Nico and Jay joining. So Nico is I don't want to like kind of toot my own horn, but baseball's kind of my thing. I'm not really don't really do fantasy football and stuff anymore. So I'm into really baseball more than anything. And Nico is really one of the only people I know that has kind of the same knowledge and baseball base as me. So I probably should have told you guys before joining. Nico and Jay are two people that you probably don't want in the league if you want to win. So Nico being a part of our league is going to be very interesting. We kind of see it the same way. He's involved in a whole bunch of other stuff, but from a fantasy baseball perspective, I'm looking forward to him. Being in the league, has a ton of knowledge. We split a team last year in a different league. So that'll be interesting. Jay joining for people. I mean, Jay is really one of the OGs to our fantasy baseball league. This is our 26th year, which is crazy to think about. Bobby, Steve, Jay, trying to think of like how many other OG that back in the day we had like Pat Pisoni and stuff, but Jay's one of the originals. Really only left for personal reasons. He was in Alaska when we started the slow roll a couple of years ago. And he's somebody kind of like Jimmy, where Jimmy joined and Jimmy's been in the playoffs basically every single year since he's joined. Jay is always in the playoffs. And there was a year, a split there of time where it was like, I would win, Jay would win, his buddy Josh would win, and then it'd be someone random like Pat, and then me, Jay, Josh, Steve Soriano, me, Jay, Josh. So Jay and Nico joining definitely bring a lot of competitiveness to the league. It's going to be a lot harder to win and a lot harder to get there. So those are two kind of cool storylines to talk about. Another one that I thought was really cool was the Paz and Soriano situation. I loved the storyline a lot more before I got to the predictions. Both of you guys literally traded everyone away last year, all of your players. You stockpiled tons of picks, and you had tons of picks in the first 10 rounds. Soriano dealt some of those away in order to acquire keepers. But then when I'm going over the predictions, I'm realizing like really what you guys did last year and this year is really going to be most beneficial next year, because you have the players now to put into your keeper spots and to be successful going forward. Like for some reason, while you guys were drafting, I was thinking to myself, like, man, like, especially for Paz, like talk to Paz a lot. And I was like, man, I'm super excited for you this year. And then like, I'm thinking to myself, well, wait, he needs those players that he got this year to go forward to next year. So it is a cool storyline. Like Soriano, really, for Steve, he always has a good team. It's really about how long he's going to be active for, which, I'll talk about in the predictions. There's always a spell where he just goes MIA in all our leagues. Hockey, he stopped doing hockey like 2 weeks in. Baseball, there's always a stretch of 3 or 4 weeks he's MIA. Even football, there's sometimes he leaves his lineup open. So for Steve, it's really not so much Steve Soriano, not so much his team, but activeness. And then for Paz, like this is, I want to say, one of his first years where he's got like a quality team. He's got some pieces. And this is not the year, at least for both Paz and Steve, next year should be like really, really cool. McIndoe, I don't want to really go heavy into the storyline now, but you'll see later. I like Mac's team a lot. So that'll be a storyline. And then kind of myself, this is the first year. Well, going back in all the history, no one has ever won back-to-back in our fantasy baseball in 26 years. So last year I won, and the year before I won. So clearly I'm not winning this year. There's no statistical way. I did myself a really what would the word be? I did myself dirty, I guess. I traded away way too many picks last year to win. I had we'll get to it, but I had 9 or 10 injuries late in the year. And so for me, Paz knows this, and most of the people in the league know this. My favorite part of the whole really fantasy baseball is you guys trading, me trading, and the GMing. Like if I could be in a league or do something where I could literally just GM and the results or whatever, like that would be my kind of dream. If whether whatever, like I enjoy that. So just kind of looking at my roster and how the draft panned out. I just think this is going to be a year for me where I'm going to be able to do what I like to do most, and winning might be on the back burner. So that's kind of like a storyline for myself. And then just from a tiers perspective, this is the first year where I really thought like there was tiering in the league. Like usually there's like one team that's clearly the bottom, and then there's like two or three that are that are decent, and then you have another like two or three, and then you have like a six that are strong. Like I think there's like a pretty vast separation from the team at the top and the team at the bottom, and even like I have 5 tiers, and I would usually say there's usually like 3, or 1, 2, and 3. So that's definitely going to be a storyline this year that I'm looking forward to. Seeing kind of how it all pans out. There's a lot of early injuries already, which I had to go back, and I had my predictions done yesterday night-ish, and I had to go back in today and adjust them some. So I'm sure a lot of people on the call did that. I thought the slow draft, I don't know, for some reason, we always touch on this. Like this year was just, it was the quickest it ever went, but man, like towards the end, I don't know if it was the amount of teams. I use my phone less every single year, so being on the phone that much was like just wild for me. Man, when it got to the end, it was tough. So those are kind of my storylines, some things I was looking forward to. I'm looking forward to that year. Thought there was something else, but I didn't note it here. Paz, anything from you in terms of like storylines, things you're looking forward to, looking at? And then before you get into the predictions?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we spoke about was when the draft was going on, like how crappy the player pool was at like round 8. Like everyone just, we're texting, me and Ron are texting back and forth, and like it's basically we were saying to each other like, I don't even know who to take because I hate every single player that's there right now. So, so I think that was, I think part of it was that obviously we added 2 more teams, so the player pool gets shorter quicker. As you get to round 10 and stuff like that. And then obviously the extra keepers as well that were taken off the board. It just seemed like, by mid-draft, you were kind of taking guys that were either complete question marks, or high risk, high reward, or, very low floor guys that could maybe have a good season. So, I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out from that standpoint,
Yeah, that was one thing too I want to touch on with you, like you and Soriano. Like I do think you guys got kind of screwed there, because if you're better at math than me, but that's 2 per every, whatever. If you guys both acquired 6 per 10, that's 12, and then per 2 per every round, that's basically like 24 picks all in total that you guys had to battle across that you wouldn't have, based on the picks you trade. So you guys kind of got screwed there. So I do appreciate you guys. I know you were too accepting to add the team, but that does kind of stink because you guys did kind of get screwed there too with us adding teams. Yeah. All right. So without further ado, Paz, if you could share the ESPN, I'll start. We'll get into it. I'll start with my 12th team.
I absolutely love this crap. You got it?
All right. So 12 for me is going to be Bobby this year. So I think there are 2 teams that are in the tier 5. Bobby's the first one. And him and the team I have in 11th are kind of separated by 4.5 points. So Bobby, 11th infield, 6th. I put the rest, so I kind of split it. I split it catcher to shortstop, and then I added DH and utility with the outfield. So catcher to infield 11. The rest 6. Total offense 10. Starters 11. Bullpen 6. Total pitching 11, and that puts him at 12 overall. So kind of scrolling through the first one would be Crone. I just think at this point in his career, just not a fantasy starting first baseman, unless you have a second first baseman. And what I mean by that is his splits last year were kind of like Blackman's esque, 100 points or more in every offensive category. And it creates a situation where you have to monitor his schedule. And in addition, word about a camp is that he may be platooned against handiness based on pitching because of what he did last year. So that's my first one. Albies, one of the most interesting players to watch this year. 2018 or 19 was probably an outlier. You would have to wonder if 2022 was also on the opposite end. And is he somewhere in between, or is he going to end up on one of those, the top or bottom of one of those two spectrums? Correa, never healthy, played a season of 150 games just once in his career. He's great when healthy, but we don't have time to not be healthy in a fantasy league. Merrifield, last two seasons, he's shown drastic signs of aging. Toronto continues to do the three-man platoon, and his volume has gone from not being not only not knowing what position he's going to play or if he is going to play, if he is or isn't going to play, and then also he's now batting eighth or ninth instead of leading off. So for me at this point in time, he's really a nice backup, just not a starter. Judge, he's been healthy for 3 of just 7 seasons. Look, I'm a Yankee fan. I just think a career year and a contract year. Look, there's no lying that people are doing a whole bunch of stuff. Science is way ahead of what any of these professional sports are willing to test. The Olympics is the only one that do it the right way, and that's why the Olympics is the only one that actually catches people. You get caught at this day and age, you're an idiot. Do I think he approaches 700 plus again? Absolutely not, which is what his prediction is. What do they have him out for? 600? Maybe last year he had 817. I don't think he sees 817. I think maybe 700-ish is a bit much. But it's just, what was he, 808? Yeah, 809, yeah. So, maybe I definitely don't think he goes to 809. Maybe 700 is something that he's close to. I do think 598 is probably less, but you got to worry about injury and stuff now going forward, now that he's gotten a contract. I didn't really do any bench for anybody just because we're short rosters this year. So down to the pitching. Urias, great. Syndergaard, just not ownable. I really don't know how he was a keeper this year. He could have got a free agent. He could have traded anyone for, I offered him Freddie Peralta as a 27th round, last round keeper is way better than Noah Syndergaard in the middle of the rounds. Noah Syndergaard's just not good at this stage of his career. DeGrom, from a sports performance perspective, he's mentally broken after the last 3 years and or 2 MLB seasons. I just don't want him anywhere near my fantasy team. He already has a spring injury, and Texas already put him on an innings cap to start all of April, and they said he's also not going to surpass 65 to 80 pitches for all of April. So, now you have to hope that he's, absolutely unbelievable for, those 65 to 80 pitches. Is it possible? Yeah, but now we're turning into almost like he's going to be a Tampa Bay Ray starter for all of April, where he's going 5. He has to be elite. If he gives up a run or two, now you're at a -6 from a good start. It's just, his total is what, 528. I guess that's kind of spot on, but it's just, you have to be really concerned with, holding him at this point in time. Snell, another guy always injured. He's thrown over 130 innings just once in his entire career to go along with his seesaw performance the last 2 seasons. And then Barrios hasn't been the same since going to the division where he has to face real offenses all the time. He was a disaster last year, was a disaster in the World Baseball Classic, and he's been a disaster all of spring. Another pitcher, just quite frankly, in my opinion, just not ownable until he could get out quality hitting. He's someone I even looked at myself. I was like, man, it's Jose Barrios though. But you can't just always draft just based on name. He just has not been good since he's been in an actual division where he's got to pitch to real teams. And then last but not least, Melee, he appears to be basically Frankie Montas. He was awful at home last year, which He's been awful all spring, and then now I see these reports that he's not able to throw 92, which is 4 miles per hour off is what his average is. So for me, that's just no thanks. You have a starter who's just battling shoulder problems already. He's not getting up to his mile per hour average. So I just think like the staff is really like Urias and Lance Lynn. And then the offense to me is just really bad. So I got Bob at 12. Pause.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on all the points. I had Bobby at 10. But yeah, for all the same points, like really you only have 2 really good starters, and then DeGrom is obviously the question mark with whether he's going to be healthy, whether he's going to pitch 150 innings. They have him only projected for 124 innings here, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, I mean, you can't really trust Snell. You can't trust Barrios. Male, he's a solid end of the line guy, but if he's having issues in the spring, that's not a good way to start the season. And then as far as position players go, I think Crone might just have an okay. I know I'm just touching on guys that you spoke about. Crone might be okay just for the fact that he plays in Colorado. And even if his home and road splits aren't great, I mean, he'll be able to outweigh at home a little bit further than he does on the road. So I think he'll be okay. I like Correa. I like Albies. I think he'll have a bounce back season. Obviously like Judge, but he's always a health concern. Meneses could potentially be, if he puts up a season like he did last year, could be a guy that Bobby puts in and kind of carries him a little bit. But yeah, I ultimately had him 10th. So I was kind of right in line with what you had.
All right. 11. I have Mike, and this completes what would be tier 5. Mike kind of definitely hampered by all the picks he traded last year to try and make a run at it. I think he ended up making the playoffs, and I don't remember if he made the playoffs and lost in the first round or if he actually ended up missing out in the playoffs, but he dealt a bunch for DeGrom. Who else did you give him? Pause. Somebody else too.
Honestly, I don't even remember.
Bieber. DeGrom and Bieber.
Oh yeah, Bieber. Yeah.
So you gave him DeGrom and Bieber, and I know he made a couple of those small moves, I believe. So, and one of them was like a first rounder, a fourth rounder, which kind of gave you the early doubles. So that definitely hampered him. I don't think he had the greatest draft. I don't typically think Mike has good drafts. I'm not a great drafter either, so that's not that doesn't say much about anything really. But yeah, so I got Mike at 11. Real Muto, obviously solid. I like Lowe a lot. He had him as a keeper and super late, so that's good. Wong in a timeshare already. Also potentially in a handiness pitching timeshare to boot, and drops from the leadoff spot to the bottom of the order. He's been on the DL every single season of his career, surpassed 150 games just once. So 385 is super low. And with that type of prediction and just what his past is, he's just quite frankly not ownable right now. Lane Thomas, I think he's a nice bench versatility piece with the left field, center field, right field eligibility, but he can't be a starting outfielder for any fantasy team. Riley's awesome. Witt's awesome. Dylan Carlson, another guy who, in my opinion, is a nice bench piece, but he's starting for Mike. So now you have 2 guys who are typically bench pieces, both in Mike's starting lineup. Walker also at some point in time is going to take his position, and Carlson is always hurt. So he's already hurt this year, and he's been DHing only in the spring. So if that continues, or whenever the actual next injury happens where he has to go on the IL, his job is essentially lost. So you have, Lane Thomas shouldn't be starting. Dylan Carlson is going to lose a starting job. Tyler Ward, this is early in the predictions, obviously, at Mike at 11, but when I was going through this, I thought Tyler Ward might go down as one of the most undervalued ESPN players. They have him at 437, bearing any health, which he does have a tendency to get hurt. He will certainly surpass 437. I was hoping to be able to take him later on. He was awesome for me last year. The lineup got better. The team overall got better. I mean, I feel like they get better every year and then just end up not doing anything. But neither here nor there. Like I think Tyler Ward goes way over. Otani, I don't really need to speak on. Lindor is pretty sweet to have. Oh, I didn't do his numbers, did I? Mike, 8th infield, 7th for rest. Total offense is 8. But it starts to go down on the pitching end. Starters is last. Bullpen is 7. Total pitching last. That's how he gets to 11. Down to the pitching pause, please. So Pablo Lopez, like he's solid. But kind of weighs out to be essentially Mike's 2. Like I don't want Pablo Lopez as my number 2 for like definitely not. And Grayson Rodriguez. He was really bad last year, the point that the Padres essentially gave up on him. They tossed him in the bullpen. They sent him to the minors, brought him back up, put him in the bullpen. However, the Orioles, who, don't like to spend a dollar, brought him over here and made him the main chip piece in that trade. He was okay there. But in the spring, he's shown kind of more of the former, like he pitched in the Padres, than the latter of what he did towards the end of the year. With Baltimore, and just kind of for me, like Grayson Rodriguez to me should be a bench piece. Like that's somebody that you trade for, you stash on your bench till he starts to show promise, or you want to use him, or you just want to keep him down there until it's ready for him to go up there, or maybe just not use him at all for the whole year. Maybe he's Musgrove's replacement. Like I can't account for that. Obviously, I took a certain amount of points off of some of these injured starters, so they'll also maybe, Musgrove goes there and his intent was to have, Grayson Rodriguez sitting on the bench. I don't know. But, I'll touch on this with Ork's team. I don't think Jimmy was so heavy with it this year. I have to look at it again. But like, I'll say this every single year. I don't understand why Mike and O'Rourke draft it's a 1.3 million chance. Then you have 1.1 times 1.3 million times holding 7 of them. And again, pause is the math guy, but now you're like, so like, that's like in the 7 millions times the 14, because it's the 2 of them. Like you're like at a 1 in a billion chance that some of these guys pan out and they hold all these guys on the bench. And at the end of the day, we have 2 prospect spots. Could you clear your everyday Joe and your freaking flyer and put all these guys in those slots? Yes. But at the end of the day, I still don't understand why they hold all these guys in there, because there's nothing you could do with them. So anyway, so he has a whole bench filled offensively with prospects and a whole pitching staff filled with prospects. And so his replacements are Grayson Rodriguez, as we just talked about. Trevor Rogers is a pitcher who's literally gotten hype off of one season. He was awful last year. He ended up essentially being a back-end fantasy streamer, and that's Mike's number 3. Like that's really bad. Nathan Eovaldi. I don't really need to tell you guys much. He's elite when healthy, but he's never ever healthy. He's missed at least 25% of every single season of his entire career. He's already batting an oblique injury. ESPN ranks him so high every year. It's almost like he's like an employee for ESPN, and he never ever surpasses point total. So it was 612 last year. He finished with 394. This year it's 545. So what are we looking at? Like 350? Like 350 is what a mid-tier bullpen guy finishes with in our league. Like that's Mike's number 4. And then Ross Stripling, again, I don't know what the plan was. Maybe either Grayson or Ross was the replacement for Musgrove, but I guess you could argue there's a couple angles here that he's pitching in a better division and for pitching and also a better, smaller stadium and a more friendly pitching stadium to make him ownable. But like do those changes give him that much of a bump? I'm not really sure. Either way, like Ross and Grayson, neither are fantasy starters. One will obviously go when Musgrove comes back, but I'm not high on this team at all. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Pause.
Yeah, I'm not going to take time here. I had him at 12 strictly because this pitching staff is terrible. So, and I've learned my own way in this league that, the first couple of years I was like, oh, my offense is great. And then my pitching staff sucks. And I've learned that that's why I finished, in the bottom 3 pretty much every single season. So I kind of learned from that. And this looks like a team that I would have drafted my first or second year in the league where, I went heavy because I like his offense. Real Muto, Riley, Witt. I like Carlson a lot more than you do. I think he's going to have a good season. Ward is very solid. Obviously, Shohei, Lindor. I think Mancini will actually have a sneaky good season this year as well. Paredes, I feel like this guy last year killed the Yankees every single time we played him. So, I feel like he has talent there, and he'll end up having a decent season as well. So I feel like this offense is all right. But there's no way to really defend this pitching staff. I didn't even know, honestly, I didn't know that Musgrove was out. So he's got a toe injury. Losing your ace.
You knew this. We talked about this.
Yeah.
He dropped the weight on his toe, remember?
That's right. The weight on the toe. Right. Losing your number one on an already thin pitching staff really just completely implodes your team even further. So I had him at 12.
All right. Okay, this is where tier 4 starts. I had Jay at 7 this morning, and after the 7 injury, he dropped to 10. So I got Jay at 10. And then there's I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams in this tier 4 that are all separated by 100 points. So this is kind of going to be the competitive tier to see who kind of bumps forward, who bumps backwards. But someone's got to get that 6th playoff spot. So, all right, Jay's team. All right, Ruiz, solid. let me do his numbers real quick. Jay, 2nd best infield, 11th for the rest. Total offense is 11. Starters 9, bullpen number 1, total pitching 5, and puts him at 10. So Ruiz, just the interesting thing with Jay's team here is kind of going to be roster construction, which I don't have any doubts that he could do. I've seen Jay perform for several years in the league, but he has Ruiz catcher, Varashu, who's a catcher. His eligibility, while he's going to play in the positions that you want him to have eligibility, you want him to be catching for you because he's getting points that other catchers will definitely not get, and he'll outscore other catchers. But if he's playing the outfield spot, he doesn't really have much value there. He has value at catcher, but then he has Ruiz. For some reason this just went off on me. But then he has Ruiz, and then he also has Will Smith. And so another guy like Will Smith, you don't want DHing. Ruiz, you don't really want catching because you want Varashu to be catching to earning your catching points. I hope people are following me, but you really want Varashu in the catching spot. But then he has Ruiz also, and then he has Will Smith also, who you don't want a catcher as your DH.
Well, let me play devil's advocate.
What?
Let me play devil's advocate with you, not to interrupt, but just to play off of this. Why isn't Will Smith going to catch 90 games this year, 100 games this year?
But Will Smith will never score the amount of points all right, so let's just go with Mike's team since we just did it. Mike's team, his DH is Lindor, who's going to score 600-700 points. Will Smith's not scoring 700 points.
But what is that? I don't understand the negative there.
Because, okay, so then, all right, so you have Dalton. So you want a hitter in your DH spot that's going to score a ton of points. You don't want Dalton Varashu as your starting center fielder because he's not going to put up the amount of points that a different starting center fielder is going to point. You want him to be catching for you because he's going to be putting up way more catching points than any other catcher, and you're burning that spot. Where other people are getting 200 total points from Ruiz, from his catching spot, Varashu's going to outscore those other catchers by 200 points.
I got you. Now I understand what you're saying.
So Dalton is most valuable in the catching spot. He has no value as a center fielder because he's going to outscore everyone else's catcher. Varashu is probably going to be the number 1 catcher by the end of the year because he's not playing catcher. He's going to play the outfield. He's going to get assists. He's going to get all those putouts. He's going to get, and then he's actually an outfielder, but he still has 1 more year of catcher eligibility left. So you want him in your catcher spot because he's going to outscore all the other catchers by 200. He'll outscore Real Muto by probably 150. And then but he has him at center field now. So that's way less valuable than having him at catcher. And then you would have Will Smith there at catcher, who's going to definitely outscore Ruiz. And then you should have a DH there who, ultimately at the end of the day and at the end of the month, there's Rizzo will probably be DH. Who else? Jared Walsh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever. So those guys will end up sliding into DH anyway. But then but there's definitely, I guess you can make a move. He can make a move because a ton of people, like I could use Ruiz. I don't even know who my catcher is, to be completely honest with you. He's not any good. So we'll get to Jorge later. Jorge's catcher is not even a starter. He's in a timeshare and on the back side of it. So there's a lot of people that could use this. I would kind of use it to Jay's advantage to ship one, maybe even two. And then so that Dalton can play catcher every day and then get those extra 150 extra plus points by the end of the year. That's just my opinion on it. I don't see any value in playing center field but I do see a ton of value in playing catcher. So then Goldschmidt's solid as hell. Araz is awesome. Tried to get him in that trade, but Whitlock, had to throw 2 extra outs. Arenado, stud. Adames, I always, he's a solid player to have. He's in Milwaukee. He had a great season last year. Get to Carroll. So maybe one, still Jake could have him just for life. So this is kind of exactly like the Tatis situation last year or the Jazz Chisholm Holmes situation for you last year. Maybe this year is not the year to be Corbin Carroll to be your starter. I told you, great job with Jazz, told Soriano the same thing with Tatis. Those are all players or same thing with who did Wander Franco 2 years ago. They all pan out over the long run. Is this the year you want him your starting left fielder? I don't know. Maybe he, most of them come up. They have an unreal first half. No one can figure out how to get him out. And then they start to slow down a little bit. And then you got to deal with their sophomore slump. At the end of the day, we're talking about this season. Do I want Corbin Carroll as my starting left fielder this season? Probably not, in my opinion. Do I want him to be my starting left fielder in 3 years? Yeah, 100%. So for this season, that would be my only concern. And just the other factor is it does stink. Listen, I was at the barrel of it having Ketel Marte for all these years. It sucks. Your best player on your fantasy baseball team is in an organization that's could care less about winning. So that's something that Jay's going to have to deal with in 3 years and whatever. Is this a guy worth keeping for a long period of time when he's literally the only player they have? Because I fell in that situation. And now Marte, who actually puts up pretty solid numbers still, ends up being honestly irrelevant because he has no help. Kind of the Brian Reynolds type, same thing. Reynolds puts up unreal numbers, has no help around him, can't score, ends up hitting a ton of solo shots, and then you kind of get screwed just because you have an elite player on a crappy team. That was my. So I talked about Varashu, talked about Carroll. Okay. Conforto, entire year out of a professional game is always a huge worry. In addition, our reports are that the shoulder is still a lingering issue despite 18 months of rehab. Then he had a cleanup surgery. Last but not least, San Francisco is still saying that he's in a corner outfield spot tryout. I don't know how much there is to it. I wouldn't want him to be my starting right fielder until I saw what he did and then how honest they're being. I really don't follow San Francisco all that much to know who he could possibly be in competition with. We'll talk about Yaz later. There's no way he could be in a competition with Yaz. I don't know, but I don't know. That's I think this is kind of a little bit where the downfall is. Maybe not the year. This year is not the year for Carroll. Varashu, I would rather see him at catcher. I don't think he's a starting center fielder on a fantasy team. And then Conforto, just way too many questions. Will Smith, over time, it's kind of touching on the same thing. I put at some time you would think Smith would de-seat Ruiz in the catcher spot, and someone else will fill the DH role. We already talked about that. Rizzo, love Rizzo, but you and I, Paz, have been talking about this all off season. He's got this lingering back issue. It's almost it seems like the exact same thing as the Clayton Kershaw situation. He's awesome when he's healthy. But at some point in time, he's going to go on the DL with the back. He's going to have to get a cortisone shot. He already got a cortisone shot in the spring. Then he's going to have to get an epidural. Then he's going to sit for a little bit. He comes back. He says it doesn't feel as strong as he'd like it to. And it ends up being a revolving thing with him. So fortunately for Jay, first base is by far, it's not even close, especially in our league because the defensive points is the deepest position. So Jay, Jared Walsh, I wouldn't really want him as my backup for Rizzo, but there's plenty you could find. I used Mitch Moreland for 10 straight years and, no one even knows who he is. So that's one position where if you're short on, it's not one to worry about. So I have for the offense. Down to the pitching. Bieber, awesome. Darvish, awesome. Garcia, he's just not my type of pitcher. I had him last year. He really let me down. I ended up trading him somewhere for something. I think I did a pitcher for hitter swap, but I just don't like how he's like hot cold. Does rack up strikeouts, but yeah, that's definitely a solid. What would that be? Jace 3 after losing Sev. Yeah, so that's yeah. Garcia's like a solid 3. Sale. A lot of people want to take a shot on him, like in our league. Like a couple people had texted me, were like, "Should I take him now? Like, what are your thoughts?" Like, I don't know. I don't see why or like the intrigue. Like he hasn't had a significant start in the MLB in nearly 4 years, 3 MLB seasons. He's always injured, and his numbers haven't been up to par, like back to his pre-Tommy John. In any of those like brief return stints, like he had 2 starts and then he got hurt again, and then he'd have like 3 or 4, and then he'd get hurt again, and like so he's not there. He's been murdered this spring, like he's been absolutely destroyed. So for me, he's just a hard pass. He's 507. Is this Jay's? No, it's not Jay's worst starter, but like for me, that's like an eighth, or we have 7 now. Like that's a number 7 flyer or like a 6 flyer. I just not for like a number 4. Like I always say, like it used to be like you need to have a huge 5, and then you could screw around with the remaining 3. Now that we're down to 7, I would say you need to have a huge 4. You kind of screw around with the 3. So I guess in that case scenario, like we'll touch on Kluber and stuff, like Sale's kind of flirting with Jay's 4-5. I would like to see someone a little bit better in the 4. Kluber, I read this morning. He was analytically the luckiest pitcher in the MLB last year. He had a field day versus under 500 teams, which is over half his starts, and he had a 3.85. Versus teams over 500, he had nearly a 7 ERA. He also pitched in one of the most loved pitching parks in all of baseball, well-known Tampa Bay is where you want to, throw. He fared well there, but he did awful on the road. So he moves to Boston, which is one of the most least friendly pitching parts, especially for a pitcher who's better versus lefties than he is versus righties. And most righties, when they go to Boston, they just try to abuse the monster. So I think Kluber this year will be a fantasy free agent by July-ish. Rosie Contreras, I have no idea why he's on Jay's team, to be completely honest. And then Luis Severino, this is really kind of what dropped Jay down from me down to this slot here. I had him at, what did I say, 6 earlier? I think, yeah, I had him at 6 to 10. He's probably, I honestly think, I bet you, I told Paz and I talked about this in length yesterday, I bet you he ends up being out for the year. Like, this is the exact same thing that happened to him either 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It was like, oh, he had like a minor lat pain, and then it was just like, oh, there's a little numbness, and it's just a strain. He's going to miss like a start. And then, the Yankees always try to be the smartest people in the room when, any fan sees that they're the dumbest people in the room. And then he ends up missing the whole year and then has to get surgery. And this is the same thing that happened to Syndergaard 2 years ago. So lat strain's a massive issue. He probably will have to get some compartment surgery. And then that's a big loss for Jay because, I know he was really struggling in spring. And so clearly this has been bothering him for a while. But then you have Bieber, Darvish, Garcia, Sev, and then Kluber, I don't think he'll hold. And then I guess, Rozier, Kelleher was the replacement. And then, but you just go from like kind of a solid 5 there, or at least a very solid 3, a questionable 4, and then you could even slide Sev to your 4. And then you have this Sale, Kluber, Contreras that you can kind of screw around with. So that's kind of my thoughts on Jay's team. Paz?
I had Jay at 8, mostly by thinking in the mindset that Severino, McCullers are healthy, a couple weeks down the line to start the season. So that's kind of where, with a lot of these guys that, you don't really know when they're coming back, if they're going to be fully healthy when they came back. I tried to take everyone's team with what I thought they were going to be when they were whole, assuming that they were not long-term injuries, obviously guys like Altuve and stuff like that are, out for 10 weeks, but they're a hand injury, and that's probably going to hamper them the entire season. Like, I took that into account. But for guys like McCullers, Severino, who I think they'll probably be back within a month or 2, and then once Jay's team is fully whole, I think it's a solid team. So I had Jay at 8. But yeah, with the question marks just around the pitching staff, I do like his offense. I think Jared Walsh is going to have a bigger season than what they're predicting here, with that Angels offense being better this season. I feel like he'll have a little more protection around him. They can't just walk Otani and Trout and then pitch to everybody else now. Conforto, huge question mark. If he pans out, this team could be really good, offensive wise. I've always liked Adames ever since he moved out of Tampa Bay, where he said that he literally couldn't see the ball in Tampa Bay. When he moved to Milwaukee, he's had a big time uptick in his offensive value. So I think from a shortstop perspective, he'll probably finish top 6-7 shortstops this year, I would think. I agree with what you said about Carroll. I can't believe, I was really surprised that they gave him this huge deal already. What was it, like 10 years, 120 million or something like that? Good for Arizona to lock him up, assuming that he's going to be, a guy that's their cornerstone center fielder, left fielder, whatever it is for the next 10, 15 years. So good on them. But yeah, similar to what you said, where I don't know if I necessarily want him as my everyday left fielder this year, at least not at this point, because we still don't know what he's going to do to start out the season, because he was great to end the season last year. And then, now that there's videotape out there on him, the pitchers are going to adjust. He's going to have to adjust back. So it's going to be the sophomore slump, like you said, is one of those things where you don't really know which way it's going to go. So I had Jay at 8, just assuming that his pitching staff, when healthy, is actually going to be pretty strong.
Okay. Going on with tier 4, number 9, Jorge. I have Jorge really gets hamstrung. He has the 12th infield, but then the rest he has number 1. So, that kind of evens out to like 6-ish. Overall offense is 12. His infield is really, really bad. Starters are 4. Bullpen is 5. Total pitching is 2. And then overall 9. So I feel like as we go along here, there's less to say as, the teams kind of get better. There's less questions. So like Heim, he's not even the starting catcher right now. So I don't know what he's going to do there. That's kind of a big miss. At best, they said he'd be in a 50-50 timeshare. Isn't going to be able to DH anymore. Like he was thrown out there last year a little bit. I think he was my backup. So, but yeah, Ty France, like you've got to hope for like a rebound year. He had such a great start, and he's in a very good offense, and it just didn't work out for him last year. Brandon Lowe, not much to say. Jaimier, he's like a player who just hasn't been good in years. He had a good shortened COVID season, and he's been awful since. So he goes to a way worse lineup in Washington. I guess maybe a field upgrade if you're looking for one positive out of the whole situation. They probably even out. Like he's just not a starter. So you have France, who's really struggled. Brandon Lowe, who's super hit or miss. He's kind of become like the Brian Dozier, Dan Uggla type, where it's like bomb or nothing. And then Carol Andio is not a starter. And then like Jeremy Pena, like I feel like everyone caught on to the hype of what we saw like on TV in the playoffs. Obviously looked nice. He really did nothing if you look at his stats, like fantasy purpose wise. Like he finished out of the top 20 in points for shortstops. He's a great keeper, I guess, like in a late round, but like he's not a starting shortstop in fantasy baseball. Like his projection's 407. Like there is majority of the bench guys that you're want to look at are between like 360 and 400. So your starting shortstop is 407. Like this is by far the worst infield in the league. And then so you have the rest. I guess there's some things he could do where, I mean, not even really. Like Buxton would be the DH replacement, like Vlad, and then Vlad takes over for France. But like France is is the best infielder in this infield. So I just think roster construction here is really tight, which gives him a really, really bad infield. Alvarez getting down to the outfield, like while elite, he has really struggled with health. So you kind of just don't know what you're going to get with him. Like, man, when he is healthy, he's one of the best hitters, pure hitters, especially from the left side in all of baseball. But you always have to be concerned. He's got the 2 knee replacements already, and he's not old. So 2 knee replacements. He had the back issue. He's gone on the DL 4 times in just the 2 years, his 2 full MLB seasons, so to call them. And now he has the one dreadful thing. And again, I don't mean to be a broken record, but the 4 things you don't want to see as a hitter is wrist, hand, whatever, wrist, hand, fingers, oblique. And he's had a hand injury with finger issue, whatever, and numbness all spring. So now you got to worry about that. So he's injury prone already. He's battling one of the things you never want to see in a hitter. I don't know. I love a great player, awesome hitter, like elite, but like you just don't know what you're going to get. And in fantasy, it's tough to not know what you're going to get. And what is he, like 584? What did he finish with last year, Paz? Can you just click him?
Yep. 607.
Yeah. So like, if so he's, projected to score 16 and let's just go with 8 less, 24 points less. And he's already battling one of the, injuries you never want to see in an offensive guy. So definitely concerning. Luis Robert, you were spot on with this last year. I actually listened to our preview show this morning at the gym. So he's only averages 98 games per year over his career, another talent, but what are you going to get and how you're going to pivot when it happens? Buxton is the backup who also is never healthy. So you have your starting center fielder is never healthy and hasn't produced to, the hype that he was. And then Byron Buxton is never, ever healthy. And the same thing. He basically has the exact same center fielder to back up the exact same center fielder. So that's going to be a situation at one point in time because you guarantee that those two are going to be injured at some point in time in the season together. And then you're shopping for an already light outfield position on the waiver wire. It's just a bad situation. Down to the pitching pause. I only wrote 2 notes really. Cole, I mean, there's really not much to say. He's finished like 1 or 2 every single year for the last several years. I tried to get Gossman from him for a while. He'll be solid again. Rasmussen's, solid. Scherzer, solid. Just got to worry about last year. He says he wasn't injured. So if he wasn't injured to the end of last year, that means he ran out of gas. And he killed me in the playoffs. So if he's running out of gas, you got to worry about his age. So, and worry about his second half performance, etc. Lazardo had a nice ending last year. Glass now hasn't thrown more than 88 innings in 5 years, which is wild. He's already dealing with an oblique injury now this year too, and in my opinion, he is just not ownable until 2024. 88 innings over 5 years. I mean, I don't even know what that is, man. Like, what is he averaging? 20 innings a year. I mean, it's just less than that. 17 innings a year. It's just terrible. And then Flaherty. I mean, I guess as Jorge's 7, this is okay. But I mean, how do you put any trust in him without seeing at least 10 starts again? Like, I just think he's not ownable till August. And you know how I am, man. Like, this is a pitching. I don't want to call it a pitching heavy league, but you need solid starters as they finish even out for the year. And it's just the infield's so bad and the pitching is really bad here. So that's where I got Jorge at 9. Pause.
I had Jorge at 10. I think the Glasnow, Flaherty as 6 and 7 are fine, but it's just that you don't know when Glasnow's coming back. If, like you said, if he's even going to come back this year, or if he's ever going to put together a string of 5 to 10 starts in a row without going on DL. So yeah, that's an issue. Flaherty, you just don't know what he's going to be. So I guess this could be one of the things for Jorge where he sees a couple starts from him, and then it's either, Flaherty's back to what he was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, or I'm dropping him and picking somebody else up. So I guess that's fine. Top 4, great. Lazardo, again, another question mark. You don't know. He was this hyped prospect from the A's, got traded. I forget who he got traded for, but ultimately, he's been hyped up for 3 years now. Is he actually going to come into his own and, have a solid career? Or is it another year where he's still learning, still developing? Now that there's some tape out there, hitters are going to adjust. He has to adjust back. The same thing that we've talked about with, a lot of the hitters. Same thing happens for pitchers. Once there's tape out there on, and all the advanced analytics that we have now on RPMs and, the drop inches of drop and all that stuff. Pitchers are a lot more exposed earlier on than they used to be. So yeah, just a lot of question marks here. Then, like you said, as an infield goes, this aside from Ty France, I think Ty France will actually have a bounce back season. And Lau is fine, but he's also getting a little bit older, so he's not, the guy that he was 3-4 years ago either. Candelario is unownable. Heim is unownable. Pena, I actually think will probably build off of what he did last year. I think he'll have a good season this year and probably finish top. He'll probably be a top 12 shortstop this year, fantasy wise. So he'll be fine. He'll be good. Jordan's a beast. Rivera, I hate. Robert Rivera, however he pronounces his name. He is one of my least favorite players in all of Major League Baseball, just for the simple fact that he is so talented, but he needs to grow up. And his approach, you see him at the plate one at bat, it looks like he never swung a bat before in his life. It's similar to Javi Baez. If Javi Baez would just grow up and mature a little bit, he'd actually be good. But Robert and Baez are the same exact player for me. Have all the talent in the world, but they're just super immature, and they're going to swing at pitches that I don't understand why. I don't understand why pitchers ever throw them strikes, because they will swing at anything and they will strike out every single time. If I was a pitcher or a pitching coach and I was facing Robert or Baez, and my pitcher ever threw one of them a strike, they would be yanked from the game right after that batter happened. There would be no excuses for it. I would not care. So yeah, just kind of how I feel about guys. And Marte, injury history prone. So there's a lot of injury stuff here that I just don't really like, and like you mentioned with Robert, Buxton, if those are his two center fielders, they're both going to be injured at the same time at some point. So there's going to have to be some probably below level replacement player that has to fill that spot. And so I have him at 10, not really much else to say here. So.
All right. Let me move on to 8. I got you.
Okay.
All right. Number 10 infield, number 8 rest, number 9 total offense, number 8 starters, 2 bullpen, 8 total pitching, 8 overall. All right. Stevenson, sneaky good pick, as the Reds are using 3 catchers to keep Stevenson healthy. He's considered their best offensive producer, so they said he's going to play first base and DH so to keep his legs fresh. So that brings extra D points to him, and it brings, I would think, Stevenson more, in my opinion, to like 500-ish. So I think that's a very low prediction at 396. He'll probably end up finishing with the first base points. Probably end up finishing around the 500 spot. DJ, like, just another interesting year waits again on what his role actually is. Back-to-back years of injuries. Now, is there a potential concern about his aging and health? None of us have any clue what the Yankees are doing. We all, know what they should do, but they continue not do it. So interesting. Marte, kind of spoke about him earlier, like, you solid contributor. You got him for a year. He'll be fine there, especially if him and Carroll can kind of take off together. Baum, I would say, like, one man's trash becomes another man's treasure, as Baum will slide into first base now with the loss of Hoskins. So that actually, in my opinion, is like 100 points more. And you also won't lose third base eligibility. So this is kind of like a Yandy Diaz situation where, you're getting first base defensive points to a third base eligible player. So that should really help Baum out a lot now, since he's taking over there. So now you got like a 450 to 550-ish player. Also a plus in the right direction. Bogarts. So 3 scary things with Bogarts for me. One, and I'm kind of surprised you went here, to be honest, because we've talked about him in length for a long time. But I mean, I guess I did the same thing myself last year, but I think the San Diego things are different. So one, he murdered in Boston and did very little away in terms of like the importance per fantasy production. He always peppered the monster for extra base hits. It's no longer there. He already has wrist issues, I saw, and he's getting cortisone shots. And we talked about earlier, wrist, fingers, oblique is auto decline for a season. And then my I think my biggest one of them all is, and maybe they're tired of him in terms of Tatis, but like if Tatis falters in left field and his defensive production, kind of like we saw with Gleyber Torres, like goes down, he doesn't produce, he's struggling, his bat is down because of it, and they want to move him back to shortstop. Like, where's Bogarts going? You have Cronenworth, you have the Kim kid. Like, I would just be slightly concerned. Like, do they have more loyalty to Tatis than they do to Bogue? I don't know. Just something I thought about that I was just like, man, like, there's a lot of guys who just say, like, kind of like you have Jazz Chisholm too. Like, oh, I'll just make the switch to center field and like all will be well. And then you're like, oh man, like there's a situation here. I'm not performing well. So a little bit concerned there. Bryant, another very interesting player this year. Durability is certainly a concern. He hasn't played over 150 since 2017. With that being said, I'm kind of interested to really watch him this year because we really didn't get to see what he could do in Colorado at all. Like last year, like it was the back, and then he had another freak thing, and then something, the plantar fasciitis. So like interested to see what he'll do there in like a full season. Albeit the 150 games or not, like he should be able to have higher production there. Trout, I told you this in chat. I really thought you kind of reached for him. He hasn't played over 140 innings since 2016. In addition, he's having the injuries you don't want to see. Muscle injuries are research proven related to aging, and it's pretty well known he's an HGH user, whether prescribed or not. Also starts with ligament damage. So you got ligaments and muscles injuries now. When he's healthy, he was awesome in the second half last year, but at some point in time, you're going to be missing him. And you kind of got to hope and pray that it comes at the right time. Kershaw down to the pitching. Castellanos awesome. Nimmo, glad he's healthy, so those will be solid for you. Kershaw, you got to hope that it's a good year on the wire. His back will definitely flare up at some point in time. He's going to miss time. You have to hope you're in a position when owning Kershaw that the starts missed are versus quality opponents in terms of who you're facing in our fantasy league. Wheeler, stud. Hunter Brown, I saw today he threw a bullpen. He made the rotation. So McKenzie, solid, just needs to continue to harness his control. Verlander, kind of the same thing. Like my only concern is, did he have something secret in Houston that he can't bring to New York type of thing? And then just the back end, durability and fatigue like Scherzer. Kershaw I just spoke about. Freddie Peralta, like I'm a lot higher on Peralta than the rest of the league was. Like I understand, the injury. He had the one sparkling year, and then last year was injury ridden. But like, I just still, as a last round keeper, I'm still shocked that kind of nobody grabbed a mid starter. Like, what is he, 476? He's a lot better than a lot of the starters that some people have on their team. So, one elite year, 1 year hurt. We'll see this year. I think he outscores the 450, in my opinion, right? He's at, 478? I bet he probably scores like 525, 550. So I think that's a little bit low. And then I guess you added Aguado today. I just wrote about Ray Wright, like had a great first half, had a really bad second half. So is it age or was it the injury that he had in the second half? That's kind of my take on your squad.
I had myself at 7. So mid-pack. I think what I was trying to do is kind of take guys that I thought were a little undervalued in the draft process and guys that I think that are going to end up having better seasons than, where we were, where we were drafting. So I think from just an overshooting their projection standpoint, I think Arozarena is going to have a really big season. I think he showed some of that in the World Baseball Classic. I think he's going to really outshine this 466. Nick Castellanos, that was one of the things where it's just, I like him as a player. He can't have as bad of a season as he did last year, I don't think. Again, another guy that I thought was getting a little undervalued. Then I took a few guys where I thought that they could potentially have big seasons off of, a couple terrible years. Rendon, yes, we know he's basically been injured the last 3 years since he went out to the Angels. He's still not that old. I think he's only 30 or 31, so he's still kind of at the end of that prime there. Can he find some of that old magic? We'll see. I think DJ, as long as he's healthy, he'll stick it out through the entire season and probably outscore this 450. Bohm, obviously a positive upgrade now with Hoskins going out. He's going to have another place to play, so he's not going to get pushed out by what the heck is the name of the shortstop that they have? The young kid. I can't think of his name. But anyway,
Sosa.
yeah. Sosa, and then the other guy too, the rookie. What's his name? Or he was a rookie last year.
Scott or Stute.
Mickey, is it Mickey? Or
They have Stute and Sosa, and then they just got Turner.
oh, right. And they have Turner, right. So yeah, I think now he has an extra spot to play. So he'll be in the lineup every day. Obviously, Jazz can break out even further. So yeah, I mean, look, I wasn't completely happy or thrilled with my draft, but I think that there's a lot of high upside guys here, and I think my team is solid enough where I can make a deal or two and possibly move into that top 5, top 6, and then make a run. So yeah, I was kind of happy, but yeah, still places to go for me. So.
Yeah, I agree. I do like the Tyler and the bomb situation. Like, there's no statistical way I could predict what those situations, like if I added those, let's just say, I think, in my opinion, they score probably 200 more points than what they're projected because of the situations that they've been in since after you drafted them. And now all of a sudden you're like into the 5th spot. So, but there's no statistical way to measure, what's going to come of their moves. So I do agree with you. I think you are like a piece or two away. And like I said earlier, like kind of sucks that for both you and Soriano, I do feel bad that you guys kind of got screwed, making those trades with the addition of the 2 teams. But in addition, like I know Soriano, his one big move, the way he did his keepers was for next year to move Slide Tatis up. And, so like, both for you guys this year was not only, it was more also acquiring pieces to add for the future than it was just to, compete this year with the picks you had. So I didn't take that into account, when you were drafting, but I think you guys are both probably set up very well for the future. Cause I don't think either anybody in our league ever has had as many picks as the 2 you guys had in the, those beginning first 8 rounds. So, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I was done by round 16.
Yeah,
obviously a lot of it they were all keepers at the end. I had a lot of late round keepers, but I was done by round 16, and we went to what 27.
Yeah.
So basically halfway through the draft, I was done with my draft.
Yeah, that's just wild to think about. Yeah. So, all right. So 7, my father. All right, so I have him 9th infield, 5 for the rest, 4 total offense, 7 starters, 11 for pen, and 10 total pitching. Another guy, he was bumped down from the right injury this morning, so I wrote very little notes. Perez, solid. He'll get another guy who will get a bump up, kind of like Stevenson. Melendez will play probably more catcher this year. Perez DH and first a little bit. Those defensive points, will definitely help, especially in the catcher slot. Aguilar can't be a starting first baseman. He had to move him out. There was somebody else I had there.
Votto.
Oh no, because Yandy in 10 days is going to move to first. And then Rojas goes to third. So that's how I did his team. So yeah, so Aguilar is whatever. So so Rojas, Diaz will end up going to first and still has third base eligibility, whatever. And then he can kind of float Rojas and Yandy there. I didn't really write much about his infield. Like Edmund is super solid. Bichette is solid. Santander is coming off a monster season, should have another one. One of the only people really who benefited big time from everyone else, like the Mountcastles, Hayes, they all got destroyed from the changes to the Orioles made to the field. Santander and Mullins were really the only 2 guys that continue to benefit. So Santander continued with power. Mullins more of a gap-to-gap guy, but everyone else took a big step backwards. But he kind of went forward. So, That's good. Springer, like, this is a very early pick in my opinion. I think he was his first round pick. This is like he's like an Evaldi type player. He's always has massive projection, and injures himself. He finishes well, well under the projection always. So, I know he dealt with it all last year and the year prior. So and I'm pretty sure he opted this to be his first actual selection. So maybe he feels he has, the player management down to a science for Springer, but he's not my type of guy. I like the consistency. Hernandez, I just never been a fan of. You and I got in an argument about this a couple of years ago. I always thought it was a 1-year outlier for him, and thus far been kind of spot on about it. He moves out of an elite offense back into a good offense, in addition to an elite hitter's park to an awful hitter's park. So his projection is a big stretch for me, and if he's basically someone that you can only throw in against home run heavy pitchers that give up a lot of long balls. And then I kind of wrote the Rojas and Horner. They're both very solid, like underprojected players by ESPN, merely based on like not having a set role. They're both utility players. They both exceeded 500 at bats, and they both have eligibility within the next 10 days in the two most shallow positions in fantasy. So like sneaky good picks that like currently look like they're not going to be like good players or in the starting lineup, but are both end up going to be super solid. Down to the pitching. Kyle Wright, concerning situation to monitor. He had a great first half last year, and I would say, like, if we broke it into quarters, a good third quarter, but he had a really bad fourth quarter, and now he's got a shoulder injury, and he's had injections, and he's clearly hasn't. Those injections clearly haven't helped, because it was announced today he's starting on the DL and he's missing minimum 2 turns. So that's got to be a blow of at least 75 to 100 points when all said and done, at minimum, and it could be worse. Alex Cobb, I think, sneaky good pick. I was looking to take him to fill out my rotation. Injury is always concerned with him, but he was actually analytically the second unluckiest pitcher last year, and he still had a 3.78 ERA. So that's like a sneaky good move. And then Pivetta, he had a great first half and then returned right to form. In my opinion, Pivetta is not ownable. He's never finished a season under 4.50. And you'll have to hope for a Kyle Wright, Martin Perez type that's sitting on the waiver wire last year, because he's definitely going to need to be replaced. I see he picked up Marquez here to replace Kyle Wright, but Marquez is just, I don't know. I know you like him a little bit more than me. He was really bad last year. It's always tough in Colorado. Not for me. To you.
Yeah, I had your dad at 6, so sort of right where you had him also. I like a few of his pieces a lot. I like Santander a lot. Like you said about Salvi Perez, they're going to be able to rest him more at DH, so his knees won't be a shot. I like Yandy Diaz. Not a big fan of Bichette, but he puts up productive numbers. So from a fantasy perspective, good. Bench, really not much to talk about here. So if one of these guys goes down in his starting lineup, it might be a little bit of a scramble, to really fill in there. And then down to pitching. The Kyle Wright situation really is a big hit. I didn't take that into account with with my team ranking today, but I still think, this team is sort of mid pack. And Marquez is very, very good on the road, but really bad numbers in Colorado. So that kind of brings his total production down. I guess he could be used sort of as like a streamer from that standpoint, where, when they're going on the road for 10 days or whatever, if he's going to have 2 starts in there, you pick him up for those 2 starts, but then you drop him when they come back home and he starts again. But yeah, the bottom of this rotation, isn't great, but I like the top of it. So I had him at 6.
Okay. At 6, I have Soriano. Third infield, 10 for rest, total offense 6, starters 10, bullpen 3, total pitching 9, and total team 6. Okay. There's just a bunch of stuff coming through. Hernandez got hit on the hand today, left the game. Haniger is going to open the season on the DL. These are all things that kind of play a little bit of a role in these predictions, but we'll do what we can. Okay. Soriano's knowledge and GMing, really, ability is never in question. I mean, honestly, most of the time, as I kind of mentioned in our storylines, it comes down to like how many weeks in the season is he going to be completely inactive for. I feel like Soriano in the league, of all the teams in our league, I feel like his offense is like the most arrow up like type of roster. So I don't really have much to say about any individual guy, but like just kind of what I like. Melendez like had a great year, really can only get better, has tons of eligibility. Mountcastle had to change his swing in the second half, got way better, tried to learn how to hit in that new stadium. Jimenez, like he hasn't been the player he was before, had a monster year last year, like can only get better. Cleveland improved their offense, adding Josh Bell. Like Machado, we know what Machado is. Tatis, like you would think he's gonna probably outperform 494. He's only missing 3 weeks. Yelich, obviously that's a down arrow. Michael Harris, he can only get better from here. Jake McCarthy can only get better here. Adolis can only get better here. CJ Abrams can only get better from here. So I just feel like his entire offense outside of Yelich and Machado, because we already know what they are, is just like all pointing in the arrow up. So I don't really have much to speak on it on individual guys, but like I like his offense a lot in terms of where he is now and the potential where he could be to the end of the year. So down to the pitching. Like Springs is his 7. There's way worse 7s in our league. That's definitely for sure. Giolito, or I guess he'd be 6. I keep forgetting that we only have 7 now. So there's way worse 6s that are owned right now. Giolito, it's kind of where this takes a turn for me for Soriano's team, but Giolito talked about it for years and he did nothing. And then, he had 2 very solid years followed by a complete regression back to form last year. To boot, there's a lot of concern. He's topped out at 91 all spring. So while he was successful, he sat at 94. So I think 607.9 seems like quite an overcorrection. Morton, not to my surprise, as I addressed him multiple times in our show last year, Morton's home run rate ballooned last year in the NL East. I always talk about that. When a guy moves from a division that's not as successful offensively to a division that is just literally so hard to throw in, I just think the NL East has been the best division, both offensively and definitely with top heavy aces over the last couple of years. He stays there this year. His spring schedule with their location, he's facing the same top-end offenses, and he is still having a balloon in home runs. So he'll eat innings. You don't have to worry about him if you ever get destroyed, but he's not a number 3, and he's Soriano's number 3, and quite frankly, even a number 4 in a fantasy rotation, where he sits, for Soriano, give or take. Sandoval. Like this is kind of Sandoval and Detmers here is where I have a little bit of another arrow up for Soriano, and I think this is kind of like where he propelled to the 6 here, if not higher. He's another guy Soriano sniped for me. I think he's primed for a big year. He broke a record with Jose Quintana last year over several pitching metrics, leading to less than 15 wins. Angel stunk and helped him with 6. So with all those metrics, he and Quintana broke a 100-year historic record with only having 6 wins with the way they pitch. So Angels have gotten better. How much, I don't know. I feel like every year we say they've gotten better and then they produce the same. However, as we talked about, I'm going to talk about with Detmers also. The Angels are steadfast and 100% going with the 6-man rotation last year. So if you do 5 less starts, and let's just say they average 20 points a start, now you're looking at 125 points direct, in the wrong way. So while I like the hour up with Sandoval and Detmers, you take that 125 off of each of them, and it's like that line evens out. So they are what they are, and that's where I think Soriano's takes a little bit of a hit there. Again, the Detmers, I think another snipe and a sneaky good pick. Everything from last year and then the spring after fixing a mechanical issue last year with a pitching coach has been really great. So same thing though. If you take 120, if he averages 20 and you're missing 5 due to the 6-man, that's 125 points, and the line of where you think he's going to rise and where he ends up is 125 down. So, yeah, that's my take on my pauses team. Soriano's team. To you, Paz.
I had Soriano at fourth. I think I like this team a little bit more than you do. I really like his infield. I think this is probably the best infield in the league. Not a I'm not a Tatis guy either. I think he's an idiot. I think that he is probably still going to feel some of that wrist issues that he had, to start the season last year, and then he tried to probably do roids to get back to speed, and then got got hit for him. So, look, if he gets back to what he was 2 years ago, or the beginning of last year, or whatever it was, I guess it was 2 years ago. He'll probably be your number one shortstop scorer. Just strictly if we're taking his primary position for right now. I know you mentioned when we were talking about my team, is he gonna move back to shortstop? I don't see how they could ever move him back to shortstop because I think he was one of the worst defensive shortstops in the league back when 2 years ago. He had like 27 errors or something like that. I don't think there's any way that he ever sees shortstop again. And I think they'll plug him out in left field because they just don't want to deal with his defense, and they need his bat in the lineup. I think Yelich will have a pretty good season this year. I think this might be a little bit low for him. Obviously, he's on the backside of his career, but I think this is a little overcompensated from what he was the last two seasons. I think he'll tick back up a little bit. This number on average will probably be closer to 3.5, 3.6. Michael Harris, really like him. Really good piece. That Atlanta team's going to be good again. So yeah, he should fit in nicely there. As far as the bench goes, like Alec Thomas a little bit, like Andrew Vaughn a little bit. I just don't know what that White Sox team is. I think that White Sox team now is probably I think they were like the third betting choice coming into the start of the Major League season 2 years ago. And they've just realized that this team is not going to pan out because, you have guys like Tim Anderson who really isn't a superstar, thinks he is, but he's not. Robert thinks he's a superstar, but is not even close. They lost Jose Abreu at first. Is Vaughn going to fill in there now? I don't know. I just don't think that they basically, the White Sox basically gave up their shot at winning a World Series by hiring La Russa as their manager. Now he's gone, but these guys have shown that they're really not star level players. Their rotation is bad. I think they're just going to be a bad team this year, and I don't know if Vaughn is going to be the breakout star there or not, but I think he could be all right. And then as far as pitching goes, I really like Castillo. I think Lodolo is actually going to have a really, really good year this year. I think Giolito will come back a little bit, be that, average 20 plus per start. I like Morton. I think he's just a solid player. Sandoval, I think you hit on good points there where maybe his great season isn't this season, but it's next season. And Detmers, I think, is going to be another solid player. So I kind of like this team overall. I think I put him fourth because there's no really big time holes that I see anywhere. So for that reason, I thought that he'd just kind of be able to be in that top quarter of the or top third of the standings the whole year.
Okay. 5, I have Nico. So this is kind of starts my tier 3. Nico's kind of in tier 3 by himself. So I think he's
I assume Nico is Nick.
Yeah, Nick. Yeah. So Nico is the split between like the tier 4 and the tier 2. He's kind of in the middle there. I don't think he's good enough to get into the tier 2 at this point in time, but I don't think he's bad enough to drop down to that tier 4 level. So he's kind of in this tier 3 individually by himself. I just, there's some question marks for me with his offense, a little bit with his pitching too. Let's see. He has the 4th infield, the 9th rest. Total offense is 7. Starters is 3. Bullpen is last, irrelevant, and total pitching is 4. So I mean, if you take out the bullpen, I guess that kind of puts him a little bit higher. 5. Yeah, I still don't think he's good enough to get to 4, but as of right now. Cronenworth. Let's see. Kirk is going to have a monster year. Olsen's going to have a huge year. He's just been peppering the not allowed to have the shift, already topping like a great season. Cronenworth. Disappointing 2022 when all said and done, and he regressed in several offensive categories. The boot analytics say he splits for sub 500 teams and sub 500 pitchers was 180 points over several sample sizes better than versus plus 500 teams and plus 500 pitchers. So he also forgot that how to hit pitchers from the same handiness and fell into a platoon late in the year. The addition of Bogarts and several moving pieces the Padres have to do to fix some odd off-season additions in terms of team needs brings a little concern to Cronenworth if these analytics continue. Like I said, I know you don't think Tatis is going back to short. I don't know. They just have we talked about this in the offseason. I just don't understand some of the moves they made. Like, I get getting better, but their roster construction is so odd now. So I don't know. So if he struggles and that continues a platoon thing and stuff, that just is a big hit. Chapman, I've never been a Chapman as a type of player. He's just increasing his swing and miss on pitches that are in the red, which is, you're in the dead set of the zone, kind of Glaber Torres type. You need to mash those, and he's just not. They've declined every single year over the last 3, and his bat speeds declined also. I just don't think he's a fantasy starter, regardless of the lineup he's hitting in. Like, Toronto's one of the best lineups, and it just hasn't really helped him out. Dansby will be solid. I know he's struggling this spring, but he'll be okay. Yoshida, I just think, in my opinion, round 2 is just way too high. I read an article that the analytical transition rate from Japanese and Chinese players is under 2% success coming to the USA. So, like, could he be good? And could it be an Ohtani type or, an Ichiro type or whatever have you? Yeah, of course. But for me, I want to be on the right end of the 98%. I don't want to be in the wrong end of the 98%. And if I'm going to be wrong about it, I don't want to do it in round 2. So I would just say I think so where he was when he was selected was a little high for me. He did put on a show in the World Baseball Classic. So, maybe that's more of things to come. And he's part of that, 2% or raises that 2%. Bellinger, like, the guy's career is over. I don't know why people continue to select and start him. He stunk for 3 years. He's fundamentally just completely broken. He's batting 192 in spring. He's in a way worse lineup and a way worse stadium to hit. I just think, like, it's the hype and the, hey, it's his year to rebound. Like, he's just not there. He's not ownable. And he's definitely not a starter. And he's at a big question. He's not ownable for me. Acuna, like, will be a very interesting watch this year. He had a really bad year last year, to the point of he finished with a final bench player fantasy total. So I know he returned from the ACL. We give him a pass, but, like, his launch angle has been worse in the spring, and it was really bad in the World Baseball Classic too. Worse than it was last year. His swing angle was really down last year. It got worse in spring, worse than the World Baseball Classic. He continues to just crush balls into the ground. Many, especially the guys in this league, are a lot higher on him than I am, and than what ESPN is. At round 11, probably worth it. But if we see another 500-point season, that's definitely a cause for concern for Nico, as he's his franchise player and can't break him. There's also, like, an odd relationship I read today going on that's brewing between, like, he's not talking to, like, management and the coach, like, for Atlanta, and he, like, hasn't returned from the World Baseball Classic yet. So I don't know. Does this become, like, I didn't think he was that type of guy. Maybe he is. But, like, or we have another situation where we have, like, a disgruntled star, like, self-sabotaging his career. I don't know. I read that today, and I didn't even know that was going on. Like, it ended, like, 5 days ago or so, and he's, hasn't joined. I don't know. So that was interesting. Maybe that's changed over the last couple of days. I don't know. JD, DH, like, it's, to me, I did this to myself last year with Nelson Cruz and ended up just dropping him. It's, like, never idea to have a DH player only that fills your DH role. I mean, like, ask the Yankees about this in real life, how that's gone the last 3-4 years. In addition, a DH only player who is declined in every single offensive analytical category going on 3 seasons, especially the 2 that come with aging. So he'll have much more opportunity in that lineup for sure. But if his skills are aging, no matter how many guys are on base or how many more opportunities he has, like you can't, those base runners aren't going to change his aging. So that's a concern. And then Gresham, like, man, I almost I'm like super happy that I ended up not. He was like, I was dead set on making him. I was gonna make him my prospect and then move Quan to my franchise and Trey Turner down to my one. And I was like pretty dead set on that for like a while. And then like the Braves just started doing weird stuff where like they were sitting and like kind of telling him that he needed more time. And like I was like, man, this is like super odd, like what they're doing with this kid. And then, sure as shit, like they're going with the old defensive veteran shortstop, and they sent Gresham down. And now they're saying that they want not only Gresham, but the other rookie also that they have in Atlanta, they're going to play in AAA for an extended period of time and flip flop like shortstop and second base every day. Like super weird. So that's a big loss for Nico because he would have been a solid utility player. He would have had shortstop eligibility in 10. So now you have second base, shortstop eligibility, and you could toss him in utility. Now, I don't know how long he's going to be down for, and I don't know if he's going to come up and even get that eligibility. So super weird situation. It's like a weird, the whole thing is like kind of like a wild soap opera. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't know. I thought he passed arbitration already, so they couldn't hold him to that July 1st date again. Like I thought you weren't, maybe they changed the rules in the new bargaining agreement, but I thought you weren't allowed to do that to players 2 times in a row. So I could be wrong. That rule could have changed. I would be lying if I told you I read the whole CBC, but or CBA, but that's a very weird situation, and that's a big loss for Nico. So going down to the offense, Singer, like I've always had some concern with him as I hate 2-pitch starters, and his third pitch is just not very good. In addition, he's been really bad in the spring and the World Baseball Classic. And due to both of those performances in both the spring and the World Baseball Classic, he hasn't really been able to stretch out yet. I'm not sure I love him really as a fourth on a fantasy baseball team, especially, due to his current circumstances. Joe Ryan, kind of the same exact thing as Singer. Like, I just don't like 2 and 3 pitch starters. Like, those are guys that are elite in, middle relief or bullpen who just go balls to the wall, throw their 2 and 3 best, but not so much in as a starter. And then Minaya, like, he sucks. I will bet anyone they want in the league. There is no way in the world. Wasn't it 654? I thought it was 6. I thought this morning it said 650.4 because I wrote that in my notes, but he ain't passing 610. There's no way he is the 7th best starter in fantasy baseball. There's no shot. So I think a lot of the people agree with me in the league because he was left there very late and everyone just kept surpassing him by when he was next best available. There's no way he's passing that. To you, Paz.
Yeah, I guess this will probably end up being the only spot where we differ heavily. I hate this team. I had Nico at 11. I don't know if I'm missing something here, but there are 3 guys in his lineup that I think are just not even ownable from a fantasy standpoint. That's Matt Chapman, Cody Bellinger, and obviously Grissom, with that whole situation. So he has 3 guys of his. How many slots do we have? 10, 11 of your starters that 3 of them are completely unownable. And then you have Kirk, who I think he's going to have a down decline from last season. Matt Olsen, he's a stud. He's going to be good, especially with the shift being gone. Cronenworth, I like him as a player, but I don't like him as a fantasy guy. Dansby, you always have to watch out for the guys that have huge seasons right before they sign a big deal. I think that'll probably be something that happens to Dansby. He'll be solid, but he's not going to – 500, that's a lot. I don't know if he's going to hit there. Yoshida, I mean, he kind of raked in the World Baseball Classic, so I guess we can say that, yeah, he's probably the real deal. But, again, he's a complete question mark. We don't know what he's going to be. Acuna, I've never been as high. We've had this conversation last year, the year before, me and you, Rhino. I'm not nearly as high on him as pretty much everyone that watches baseball is. I don't think he's great. I think he's a very, very good player. He's not close to a superstar for me. So yeah, I mean, if you're basically putting Acuna as the centerpiece of this entire offense here, I'm just not going to like your team. JD Martinez, you hit on it, decline. I think he utilized that green monster really well as well. Now he's moving out to LA. That roster has kind of gone through a little bit of a transition, let's call it. It's not as good as it was the last few seasons when they were considered the favorite to come out of the NL. I think now, in terms of betting favorites go, I think the Dodgers are now not only at the top of the NL, not only not at the top of the NL, but they're not even at the top of their own division. And you have the two teams in the East. And so I think they're kind of rivaling. Last I looked, they're kind of rivaling like the Phillies as like the fifth or sixth in terms of coming out of the NL, favorites to come out of the NL. So yeah, and then as far as bench goes here, Beatty, he's not on the team as of now. I don't think. I don't think he's making the team. Eloy, another declining. On the back end, we don't really know how old he actually is, type thing. It looks like he might be a couple years older than he's listed at. Stott, he'll be good. Stott was the name of the guy that I was trying to think of. When we were talking about my team, where he's going to be, entrenched as the, short, probably the second baseman there. But yeah, he could be a platoon because obviously they have Trey Turner there, who's going to slide into shortstop. JP Crawford had a really good year last year. Who knows about what he's going to be this year? He's already dealing with some, some minor things going into the season already. Pitching wise, Montgomery, I think he does not even come close to this 630. Logan Gilbert, I think he's fine. Dylan Cease, he's not touching 718. Brady Singer, he's not touching 615. Joe Ryan's not touching 550. Manaya, I agree with you completely. He's probably not touching 500-ish, 550. Senga, complete question mark. We have no clue. So I hate this team. Like I said, have them at 11th, and there are a ton of question marks here. And, 3 guys out of your top 11 hitters that are not even pretty much ownable in a fantasy baseball league.
All right. 4, I have myself. So I'll just go over kind of overview, and then you could take it from there. I thought I did myself really dirty, as I mentioned in the storyline. I didn't have a pick from round 5 to round like 13 or 12 or something like that. So that's always going to hurt you. I did have a double 4 and so I didn't have a pick from 6 to 13. I had a double 4 and a double 5. One of them is Altuve, so he's gone. Probably for the year. It's a hand injury too, so you basically just wash him for the year. But then like as we are going along, and like you had mentioned earlier, we were talking about like the players and stuff. I was like very surprised that I don't know, like I just don't think anybody's team is really all that great. So I guess everyone was kind of dealing with the same player pool that I was. Like Jansen will be fine. Walker, Adam Frazier's obviously a replacement for Altuve. Bregman, a keeper. Turner, Quan, Mullins, Verdugo. Like the offense is okay. The pitching staff got a lot better today. Just from Wes is projected for like 350 or something like that. He's going to be starting now, thankfully. So you could kind of push him up to 5. Gallon, Webb, and Alcantara super solid. Talion and Lauer, one of them will be gone very shortly for Whitlock, who's going to have a super solid year. Also, his projections based off of not making the rotation. He's in the rotation, so you kind of bump him up to 550-ish. So that all changes things. You can't math, like I said earlier about Paz's team. You can't, just statistically go ahead and make those alterations because, you really don't know. So, feel like my team got better today, but there's definitely there's no way I'm going to win 3 times in a row. It's statistically impossible. And 2, I just don't think based on the other teams in the league, like last year I had said on the thing, like I thought I had the best team in the league when I was going into last year, and the year prior I thought I had a really good team and a really good shot. So I definitely don't see this team as being that. So I'm definitely looking forward to GMing and making some trades and making some other people better and building my team for the following year when I'll have a full slate of picks and stuff like that. I actually too. It's up to you. You could give one or not. I'm later on. I'm going to give who I think is actually going to play in the championship. So I based on right now today, I think I have the fourth best team, but I don't plan on probably even being in the playoffs. So go ahead, Paz. You could touch on the actual team.
Yeah, I think the Altuve injury is a big loss for you. I had you at 5. Um, in terms of guys that I think are going to outperform, what ESPN has them projected at. I think Cedric Mullins is going to have a bigger year. I like Ahmed Rosario. I know I was reading a lot of stuff where they were saying avoid the two Cleveland infielders because they're not going to be able to duplicate what they did last year. But I kind of disagree. I think Rosario, they're just both so young that they're just going to keep progressing and get better. So I think Rosario will probably outperform this year. Kwan's one of those guys that I just don't know because he's such a contact hitter that, if he has a little bit of batted ball, bad luck, this number could come down. I should have probably done a little more prep and looked at like his luck factor last year and see where he kind of came in there, because if that number was really high last year, I think this number is definitely going to come down. If he was sort of like MLB average, I think this number is probably about right. But because he relies so heavily on, slapping the ball around, like they have him projected for 10 home runs here. Will he get to 10? Probably. But yeah, because he relies so heavily on singles and doubles, and, more slap happy, if he gets some of that batted ball luck to not go his way, this number could potentially come down. Frazier, I like, solid player. Christian Walker, fine. Jansen, I guess it'll just kind of turn out to see what his situation is there in Toronto. Obviously, Kirk is going to be playing. He's going to be the starting catcher, but are they going to try to save his legs a little bit more? So Jansen's going to be, in sort of like a 50-50 split where he's catching, 80 games or whatever. That's a possibility, but I think you probably need to make some sort of, upgrade here. Obviously, Trey Turner is going to be a beast. I hate Bregman just as a person, but I think he'll end up outperforming probably this number here. So yeah, I think it's a solid team from a pitching perspective. I really like your rotation. Alcantara, obviously, if he's not the best starter in the league, he's a top 5 starter in the league. Zach Gallen, really good. Logan Webb, really good. Wisniewski, obviously, you said that, you said that he made the rotation. This number is going to obviously come up, assuming that he doesn't completely implode and then they send him down for more seasoning. Tyon is an innings eater, so he'll just, he'll get you 15 to 20 points in a start just because of the fact that he's going to eat up innings and score points from there. Tyler Anderson, not a huge fan, but, as their 5th, 6th, 7th guy, fine. Eric Lauer, similarly, he might not be on your team, for too long. So we'll go from there. But overall, had you at 5th. So.
All right. At 3, I got Mac. Mac is just, man, he has the number 1 infield and number 1 starters, and it is, I mean, his starters are just not close to anybody, in my opinion. Number 1 infield, he gets hurt though by the 12th rest, we'll call them, and then that leaves him at the 5th total offense. Starters number 1 by a mile. Bullpen 10, irrelevant. Total pitching ends up being 3 because the bullpen, and then 3 overall. All right, so I will go Bell. I've always been a Bell guy, but the second half of the Padres after the trade and those numbers continuing through playoffs and in the spring is very concerning. First base can take it as he could take it as deep as you want. So there's others for hire on the wire that could go deep to fill that hole. Adley is going to be a stud for Mac for probably forever. He also adjusting to the Orioles dimension changes. But he will be top 5 catcher sooner rather than later for however long McAdoo wants to hold on to him for, plain and simple. McNeil definitely going to benefit from the banning of the shift. He's big on line drive, ground balls in the hole. He'll be able to extend those. I like him there. J-Ram, I mean, arguably the best offensive fantasy player, if not like at worst 3. So you got a top 3 player at third base, which is a little top heavy, but if after those 4, there's really nobody else. So really one of the shallower positions in all baseball. Seager, like what's crazy, this is one of the things that like people aren't talking about, which I don't understand. So, well, I guess if you don't really go to the analytics, but he's building on like a great and fully healthy 2020. And it's like repeating that seems like it'd be hard to come by, but they don't realize that Seager was the 3rd most unlucky hitter in the MLB last year into the shift. So with that being gone, and if he just repeats last year and then take 47 of those hits that he got taken away from from last year due to the shift and add them on there, he's by far the number 1 offensive player in the league. So not only does McAdoo have a proven top 3 player, he has a player then 10th. That was the 3rd unluckiest player. He could potentially have the number 1 and number 2 offensive players in his infield. So in my opinion, best infield. I think Bell will return. A lot more people in that lineup to hit with than being in Washington. Obviously, clearly something was wrong in the Padres. Then there's a little bit of a downfall here. Like Hayes is still adjusting the Mountcastle thing, and Hayes, it really affected them last year. Both of them, fly ball hitters, power hitters, it really was trouble for them. Yes. He's going to be platooned again this year versus lefties. He also still can't hit breaking balls. So after his unreal rookie campaign, all pitchers throw him are breaking balls, and now the Giants won't play him against lefties. So this is a player that you have to rely on to always be ahead in the count. And then on the back end, when he's not playing against lefties, you got to have somebody in there. I felt like center field was super short this year. And this is kind of where Mac fell. I missed a center fielder. I know Mike missed a center fielder. He was talking about trading. So I think a lot of us missed center field because the drop off just was like out of nowhere. But he's definitely gonna have to be replaced because he's not going to be playing for, half the season. And then Blackman, we could touch on this a billion times. I had him all last year. He's just like, for someone like me, I like to kind of go on Sunday and set my lineup for the entire week. I think Mac's probably one and the same, and there's a bunch of us that do the same thing, and we're not on there every single day. Blackman's someone you literally have to go look at the Colorado schedule, see if they're on the road or not, and then go and adjust them because he does nothing on the road and everything at home. So when he's home, it's great. He rakes, but then it's just for me, it's just annoying to keep up with. And that's the same thing you have to do if you own CJ Crone. And it's the same thing you used to have to do with Trevor Story. And it's just those type of guys, it's just obnoxious where you have to log on and see if they're at home or on the road and if they're going against a lefty. So he's a great piece to have. If you have another, I'm trying to see here, Seth Brown. I wanted Seth Brown too. We didn't talk about that too, but just going back real quick to my team, I got in my first 13 picks, I got freaking sniped by Soriano, McAdoo, and whoever was Jimmy that was next to me. I got sniped 13 times in 13 rounds. How that's got to be a record, dude. It was unbelievable. But neither here nor there. Seth Brown, that's probably a good replacement to interchange with Blackman. He should have a solid year. I know there's nobody there, but he's always been a good player. Turner, much like Renfroe 2 years back, this is going to be a very underrated pick from Mac, I think. Turner is an elite bat for the Green Monster. He loves hitting those lofty fly balls that don't go out of many parks, but they're all doubles in Fenway. If he stays healthy, he definitely crosses. He's crossing the 35 mark, which is, a little concerning. He will definitely fill the box score for Mac, and he's well above 400. If Turner stays healthy, mark my word, he's going to be a 600-point player this year. It's the exact same thing I said about Renfroe 2 years ago that you guys disagreed with me on. He freaking raked, and then he went to Milwaukee last year, and I said, get off of him, and he sucked. That's going to be Turner this year. They're the exact same swing. They have the exact same loft rate, everything. Torres, Glaber, They're certainly better, I think, to fill like your utility role, just in terms of like you could throw anyone in there. I would think there's got to be someone better there. His strikeouts went up again for a third straight year. His walks went down again for a third straight year. And he's probably, unless the Yankees outsmart us, which we're all hoping they do, and end up starting the kids, he's going to be at the bottom of the lineup again, towards or outside of, what do you want to call it, the prime of the meat of the lineup. But then if they roll at the rookies, then he'll be above them and he'll be in a more prime position. But I don't know. We'll see what happens there. Cashman, chokes on him. So maybe he ends up being in a better position than I think he is. Another underrated pick for Mac, why I really love this team, is Tovar, another guy he sniped from me. I haven't spoke on anyone's bench piece so far. I had to stop on Tovar. Tovar is going to be something special, I think. He's another player. I said sniped for me. This is going to end up being Torres' replacement in the utility role. It stinks that Mac's potential, like I said earlier, the Seager, like his 2 and 3 best offensive players are Ramirez and Seager. They're both, Seager's not getting any additional eligibility, and neither is Tovar. So one would have to clog the utility role if that ends up being Torres' replacement. Not the end of the world. It's just, you would hope that, I don't know, maybe he was a second baseman and it's whatever. You're taking out a McNeil type instead of having to take out a Seager type. You don't want to be sitting Seager. You don't want to be sitting J-Ram. So you would hope that it would be better off if Tovar was a first baseman, second baseman, left field, center field, right field, something like that. So that's the only thing that stinks, but I think he's going to be really good. But it's just, the eligibility concern that's on the horizon. Down to his pitching. This is as good as it gets. Max Fried is a stud, ace. Valdez, this is probably outside of every trade I made with Soriano last year, where every single guy he traded me got hurt. This is the worst trade I've ever made in fantasy baseball, giving up on Valdez, because I'd have Valdez, Alcantara this year. I probably wouldn't have a trade for Webb. My team would be sick. Valdez is an absolute stud. Fried is an absolute stud. Merrill Kelly is an unbelievable, in my opinion, 3. Bassett is a super solid. He was just too soft for friggin' the Mets. He's a super solid 4. Miles, even if he just has a repeat year, an innings eater, he's a 600 pitcher. He's his 5. I wanted John Gray so bad. Another guy he sniped from me. John Gray is going to have an awesome turnaround season. Mark my word. I think Gray in Texas is going to have a monster year. Went to Driveline, went to mechanics, got all this stuff figured out. He's doesn't have to worry about Colorado crap anymore. He's in a better pitching park. I think John Gray is going to have a huge year. So this ends up, in my opinion, being max 3. Then you have a Merrill Kelly out of 4, a Bassett out of 5. Miles is a great innings eater, a 600-point pitcher as your 6th. And Stroman, then you have one guy, literally. I'm not a Stroman guy, but your worst pitcher is 514. And there'll be, let's say, 8 to 12 guys that will finish with a 20-point average on the waiver wire if Stroman just doesn't have a year. So his 7th pitcher has the potential to be a 20-point average pitcher. I just think this rotation is unreal. It's going to be very, very hard to beat McIndoe when you have the Fried, Valdez, Kelly, I guess, would be there too. Yeah, so when you have the Fried, Valdez, and Kelly lined up in the same week for doubles, he's going to be very, very hard to beat. Very hard to beat. And I just love this offense. And I don't know, the more I look at it, maybe I should have him even higher than 3. But yeah, pause.
Yep, here's my number 1 team in the league. Mainly because Mac is my new best friend, so that's really why I put him there. But yeah, I love this team top to bottom, and there's really not much more to add to what you said. I think Benintendi's gonna have a really good year, so he'll probably end up sliding into one of these, either the utility spot or the left field spot. You can move Hayes around to get Blackman out. I think the only issue on this team is probably the center field spot because of, like you said, if he's platooning, if he has his platooning, he doesn't have anyone else to slide into here as of right now. But there's just guys on here that are all going to be probably outscore the most guys on this team. I think out of anyone else's team that are going to outscore what their projections are, certainly lie within this team. And then from a pitching perspective, again, not really much to add. You kind of hit on everything. Fried, Valdez, Kelly are as a top three. Those could all be number one guys on everyone else's teams here, aside for someone that has Cole or a couple of handful of other guys. But to basically have three number ones, then Bassett could easily be a number two. Mikolas and Stroman, as the bottom of the line guys. And I agree on John Gray. I think he's going to have a really nice season. So, yeah, my number one team here.
Yeah, the more I look at it, actually, I'm going to flip-flop these two. So I'm going to have Mac at 2. And then my actual number 3 is going to be Jimmy. The more I look at Jimmy's team, I don't really like it that much, but I actually there's not really many other teams I like more. So I'll put Jimmy at 3, Mac at 2. So kind of doing a reverse real quick. I think I did the same thing last year, right, with Mike's team, and then switched.
Yeah,
yeah, right. So Sean Murphy, solid. Freddie Freeman, solid. Tyro Estrada, he'll be a nice utility piece, but he is his numbers real quick. Sorry. Jimmy, 5 infield, 4 rest, total offense 3, starters 5, bullpen 4, total pitching 7, total team. I had him at 2, but I'm at 3 now. Yeah. So all right. So yeah, Tyro Estrada, solid. They'll move him around, so he actually might gain. I think I saw he was going to be potentially playing the hot corner too. So Jimmy might have the ability to have him go second, short, third. I know he's starting at second, but I think that for some reason I thought I read that they were talking about him also playing a little bit of third. Nothing out of the ordinary for him. He kind of did that for the Yankees, and I know last year, I'm surprised he actually doesn't have third base eligibility. I thought he popped there. I know Nico and I had him in our other league together. I thought he popped over at third a little bit more often, or at least often enough to have the 10 for 3B, but I could be wrong. Brian Hayes, don't like him at all. I've talked about him literally every single year. He's just never healthy. Isn't he battling? Yeah, he's battling a thumb injury now already. Briefly sidelined him, so now he's got a hand thing. He hasn't lived up to anything. I don't know. He's got no one to help. Brian Reynolds, I don't know. If they ever lower the price, you would think that he's gone this year also. So now he's really solo. Wander, probably one of the top offensive players, but now I see they're more worried about the quad than they thought. I forget what he dealt with last year, but maybe this guy's got kind of a leg thing. I've always had that a little bit. My one quad has always given me an issue, quad and hamstring on my one leg when rounding bases. Maybe he has something like that, just the way your body structure is developed, that it's going to be something bothering for him. I thought last year was a leg thing too. I could be wrong, but I thought last year was also a hamstring quad type of thing last year where he sat out. No,
he lost a month in the first half due to hamstring and lingering quad.
Yeah. So maybe he has that kind of build, whatever that is, that him and I have, and I'm sure many others have a weird thing where you're rounding bases and you get continuous quad and hamstring issues.
And then he also he had wrist surgery last year too.
Yeah, I remember that one, but I thought I remember the leg thing too. Yeah, so now he's dealing with that again, and it looks like MRI either today or tomorrow. So that could be a concern for Jimmy because, anytime that, Freddie Freeman obviously is best offensive player, and Mookie right there too, the two of them in a combo. But I mean, I don't know. I'd probably rather have Wander over Freeman and Mookie, especially where he has them in terms of keeper value. Ian Happ, he'll probably be traded at some point in time. He openly admitted on the Talking Yanks podcast that he basically hates hitting in Chicago because it always limits his power. But last year, his batting average went up a little bit in terms of while his power went down. And he's a solid player, man. I've always liked Ian Happ. Julio Rodriguez is a stud. Mookie Betts is a stud. I don't need to talk about them. Abreu, interesting. Jimmy Snipe, that's one of the guys. Jimmy Snipe for me. I'm interested to see him this year because last year, they were just a disaster as a whole, but it looked like he was having some lingering aging effects that were going to start bothering him going forward now in his career. But then it looks like the White Sox are a complete disaster. So did he kind of tap out? Was he done with the BS? Was he part of the BS? I don't know. Very interesting to see him this year. Well, I guess now that Altuve is gone, that changes things a little bit. But I would definitely say that the Houston lineup still, even without Altuve, if you have a healthy Jordan, healthy Bregman, healthy Tucker, and then when Altuve returns, that's a very ridiculous, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however they structure it. And we'll see, like this year, there'll be a good sign to see if his production comes back this year or not, or if he's actually aging. But good opportunity for him for definitely what's crazy to call like him. What was his stats last year? Can you just look at his stats last year? Like people were saying it's going to be a rebound year, but he probably still had his oh no, he only had 1575, huh? Yeah. See, like he's always penciled in for a solid 3,100, like without anything. So I guess that is a down year for him. That's half the home runs and probably half the, not half the RBIs, but a third of the 2/3 of the RBIs. Yeah. So this will be interesting to see. Definitely a rebound year, and Jimmy will thankfully give us a sign for next year if he's going to turning or not. To the rotation, like Nola, stud, McClanahan, stud. But then this is for me where it kind of falls off a little bit. Jimmy, I had a hard time. I don't know how much Rodon is going to miss, so I just took 50 off. I don't know how much Gonsolin's going to miss. I took 50 off. Obviously, Heaney and Peterson aren't on the team, or maybe Heaney and Cabrera. I don't know, however you'd structure it. So let's just toss Cabrera and toss Heaney, right? No, we would toss Heaney and Cabrera and Peterson. So Strider, I'd be a little bit worried about, just the typical sophomore stuff. I feel like that affects even the best of the best have struggled with the sophomore situation. Martin Perez, the only reason I ended up not keeping him is because I saw that he was one of the luckiest pitchers last year with balls in the red zone and or nitro zone, whatever you'd like to call it. And he hung around our draft for a really, really long time. So that's something you got to be concerned about as Jimmy's 4, with a potential sophomore slump for his 3. But then you have Rodon coming back and Gonsolin coming back, who, both should be solid. For Jimmy, you would hope that the Rodon injury, which happens every single year except for last year in his entire career, is now out of the way, and going forward, he'll stay healthy. But that's yet to be seen. So some question marks with the injuries here. I mean, Rodon and Gonsolin are obviously light years better than Peterson and Cabrera. And then Heaney, you kind of play around with on the waiver wire, but just the Strider Perez situation. I guess I'd feel a lot better if it was Nola, McClanahan, Rondon, right? And then Strider would be your 4 with a potential sophomore. I don't know. I definitely don't like this team as much as I like Max though. So this is my 3. Pause.
Yeah, I had him at 3 as well. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I kind of tried to, for guys that I think are going to be back in the first month or so, I tried to put their, I basically envisioned their team as what they're going to be when they're whole. And like you said, if you slide Rodon into the 3 or the 2, whatever order you want to put these top 3 in, and then Gonsolin as the 4 or the 5, that obviously takes away Heaney, because he's unownable pretty much. Peterson, we don't even know if he's going to, or I don't know if maybe the Mets announced that he's actually the 5th starter, but there's a potential that Peterson's not even actually the 5th starter at this point. So this player will probably get dropped. I liked Cabrera before I made the trade with you for Hunter Brown. Cabrera was going to be my prospect keeper. I don't know if this is the year that he really breaks out, but I think ultimately down the line he'll end up being that pretty solid 2-3 starter in the major leagues for whatever team he ends up being on. If Miami keeps him, or if they deal him for more prospects, and because they never want to win and all that stuff. But
isn't he not? Aren't they keeping him in AAA though, or did he end up?
He's starting in the. Yeah, he's the favorite to win the final spot. Yeah,
okay.
I think I heard over the weekend. I read this past weekend that he is going to make the the team.
I thought that was last weekend though, right? I thought I read.
Yeah, but I thought I heard this weekend that he was making the team.
All right, maybe I misread it. I thought that he was still they thought they were going to send him back down. I could be wrong. I thought I read that though, but I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, and then as far as hitting goes, this is probably the best outfield. I don't know if you I forget what number outfield you put him at, but this is probably the best outfield in the league. Then as far as the infield goes, really solid players. The Franco injury is something that I did not take into account. This is one of those things again where if it's a lingering issue, that could be one of those things where the entire season it's kind of he's hampered the entire year. That could be a big downfall. But yeah, overall number 3. So for me as well.
All right, and that brings us to the number 1 current team, O'Rourke.
My number 1 team as well. So just to
yours is O'Rourke too.
Yep. Oh no, sorry. Mac was my number 1. Orc is my number 2. My bad.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. O'Rourke, 7th infield. The rest 2, which is left field down. Total offense 2. Number 2 starters. Number 8 pen. Number 1 total pitching. Number 1 total team. And I think O'Rourke right now is kind of in a. I have O'Rourke in a tier of his own. So like Jimmy Mack probably interchangeable a little bit. Jimmy Mack and I interchangeable. But I think O'Rourke is right now, as his team sits, is pretty well above everybody else. Like I have him, like I kind of had Nico in his own tier by himself, tier 3 in the 5 spot. I have Orkin by himself in the tier 1 in his own spot by a decent margin. I'll just touch. There's really not much like that. I do have a couple concerns. So Moreno got hit by a pitch. I just don't like when hitters are dealing with any type of hand injury, any swelling, anything. But with that being said, this projection at 364 is also off the fact that he was supposed to be splitting time with Carson Kelly. Now Carson Kelly's out for the year. So that will be, whatever, if it evens out or if the hand is healed and it wasn't as big of a thing as whatever, you're looking at, let's say, I don't know, whatever, let's give him an extra 100 bump up for extra starts at 464 now. So that's 100 plus the offense. Tristan announced today, I saw that he was named starting first baseman for the Sox. So he's in, which probably a bump to 566 or so. Semien, I'm just not big on him. I think he doesn't get to 561 again. There's just no way. Look, he had that 1 year we all talked about. He was the guy with the biggest one in regression. He ends up hitting 25 and stealing 19. I don't know. He finished top 70 in points, top 30 rotisserie. I don't know. He's just not for me after the transfer. He's had a good spring, and that lineup is gotten better and is super solid. So maybe 561. Maybe he gets 561. So maybe that's kind of spot on. Devers a beast. Should also produce more. I don't really think losing people are up in roar like JD Martinez is a monster loss. I think if we see World Baseball Classic Yoshida, that's more than enough of a replacement with the addition of Tristan also every day than the loss of an aging JD Martinez, in my opinion. I don't know. Some people like JD more than I do. Not O'Neal Cruz, like kind of forgot about him when we were talking about Brian Hayes earlier, but he just needs to come into his own. Strikes out a lot for a points-based league. I had him on my radar with Gresham to keep as my prospect guy, but decided I thought Kwan was the best. Just another thing, like now he has to sit forever. Reynolds gets shipped if they lower the price. Hayes will be hurt. Now you have O'Neal Cruz literally trying to single-handedly produce points all on his own. It's kind of like a Corbin Carroll situation. Friedel, I think his offense goes down here a little bit. I don't know. This is kind of where I just don't understand why O'Rourke does this. He told me in the chat that he'll be there at the end, so I don't have to worry about them. But I don't know what the end means because he never has won a championship in our league. So is the end? I don't know. Finishing second? I don't know. I would like to see him 1 year. I guarantee you, if 1 year he changes style of holding all these prospects and just added some actual consistent players and add some really solid bench pieces, I guarantee you he'd win a championship. So I don't know. But Friedel, Raul Green, same thing. Soto, stud. Vinny's is a monster beast. Would definitely benefit if they just got him I don't know, anybody but Salvi Perez. Like, I guess the three of them will just try to bash together Vinny, Salvi, and Melendez. Tucker, monster. Gunner, just is going to be a stud eventually at some point in time. But this is kind of what are they going to do with him this year? Are they going to play him at third? So
Honestly, I'm not sure.
This is kind of the same situation that McIndoe's in, where like Devers is a monster beast. You don't want to sit him. You don't want to sit Tucker. He's in a situation where he has to sit Devers, Soto, Tucker, or Gunner. And that's just kind of sucks just because of eligibility. So maybe he moves one of these pieces to kind of open up his roster construction a little bit. But like, you never want to be sitting Tucker, Soto, Devers. And I mean, at some point in time, probably sooner rather than later, Gunner. Like, Orioles are coming, man. At some point, I know like everyone's kind of big joke, but like, man, they're coming. Volpe made the roster. I mean, this will be a solid piece and could potentially play replace Cruz. I'm not big on Volpe. Back in my broadcasting days or journalism days, whatever you want to call it, I've covered him multiple times when he was in high school, and his swing is very long and stuff. I'm not high on him, but I'm not high on what Yankees brass has done over the last 10 years to have faith in the fact that he'll make the opening roster, and then I could just see them like planting him on the bench, which will just be the worst thing possible for him. But that's what the Yankees do. They have no idea how to scout, and they have no idea how to handle their youth, as we've seen over the last 6 years. And then down to the pitching, Burns, beast. Alec proved me wrong. I thought he'd have a little bit of a down year last year. He was solid again. Does need to get his control under a little bit. Javier is super solid for a 3. Kirby is very under 541. He'll surpass that. That division is dog shit. He probably gets to 600. So in my opinion, you got 4 600 pitchers here. If Hunter Green was pitching anywhere in Cincinnati, I'd probably guarantee this 539 number to be like 602, but he just kind of gets screwed with stadium. And he's still trying to come into his own a little bit. Cal Quantrill is probably a little bit high at 585, but I don't know. He's solid though. So like, this is kind of where the same situation as Mac, where like, man, like your worst pitcher is like, I don't know, like Dustin May, and Dustin May is pretty solid. If he like Cal Quantrill, really solid. Hunter Green, like, they're just their staffs. Like I said, like you got to have the pitching, and the two of their staffs are just super, super solid. So, and his offense is just super solid. If he could just improve this roster construction a little bit, very, very good. Pause.
Yeah, I'll start here. Pitching, really good. Everyone is, like you mentioned, these top 4 could potentially all be 600 plus guys, with the chance of 2 guys being 700 plus guys. It's just going to be a solid team the entire season. He's not really going to have any down weeks, which is why I had him at 2. I think just from a consistency standpoint, this team is going to be consistent every single week. He's going to have weeks where obviously they go off and, maybe he scores 1,000 points or he scores 900 plus points, but he's really never going to have a week where he's going to score less than 850 points or, things like that. So, that's why I had him at 2. I think Volpe's going to win the job, and he's not going to obviously do what he's doing in spring training, but he's going to probably contest for taking over for O'Neal Cruz, or if he plays second base, he's going to have that second base eligibility. He might take over Simeon. The really only guy that I don't like on this team really is Simeon. He was one of those guys that, he was a solid player, but he again overdid what he did in his contract year, and now he's never going to get back to that point, and people are still thinking that he's that level of player. Just a solid team overall. And again, there's going to be weeks where he's going to be the top scorer in the league, but there's never going to be a week where he'll be bottom half of the league. I really don't think so. So that's why this, Orcs record throughout the season is probably going to end up being, I forget how many weeks we play in a regular season, but he'll probably go 14. Let's say it's 18 weeks, he's going to go 14-4. If it's 20 weeks, he's going to go 15-5. Like, there's really not going to be any bad weeks in there. So you're going to really have to outscore him to beat him. It's not going to be one of those weeks where he'll beat himself.
Yeah, I agree. All right, I'm gonna run down mine real quick, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give my 6 playoff teams and my championship matchup. If you want to think about it while I do this,
Okay.
12 Bobby, 11 Mike, 10 Jay. Well, hold on. Tier 5, Bobby 12, Mike 11. Tier 4, Jay 10, Jorge 9, Paz 8, Dad 7, Soriano 6. Tier 3, Nico. Tier 2, Ryan, Jimmy, Mac. Tier 1, Orc. So Orc 1, Mac 2, Jimmy 3, Ryan 4, Nico 5, Soriano 6, Dad 7, Paz 8, Jorge 9, Jay 10, Mike 11, Bobby 12. My 6 playoff teams are going to be O'Rourke, Jimmy, Mac, Nico, and Paz. And Mac is going to be O'Rourke in the championship.
I'm just gonna give I'm gonna just go back through the breakdown. It's too hard for me to project and all that stuff. In terms of a fantasy playoff situation or whatever. I will say I think that Mac and O'Rourke have the 2 best teams. So I would just foresee them matching up in the finals. So as far as the championship matchup goes, that's where I would go. But my 1 through 12, Mac 1, Orc 2, Jimmy 3, Soriano 4, Ryan U 5, Big O 6, myself 7, Jay 8, Bobby 9, Jorge 10, Nico 11, Mike 12.
All right. That completes it. Matt can end the recording for us. We'll have the recording. We'll send it out for anybody that wants to re-listen. I know I'll re-listen to myself. Look forward to a good year, man. A lot of good storylines, and good luck, everybody.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks everybody for joining.
Good job, guys.
Oh yeah, where is Jimmy? Is Jimmy still in? He bounced. He said he had a power rankings, maybe into it. Yeah. All right. Later, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Happy Sunday.
Yeah, happy Sunday.